Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the luncheon. In order that we meet the hard deadline of the downlink, we're going to begin the speaker's presentation this afternoon, actually before everyone has an opportunity to have their food. So if you'll kindly bring your attention to the stage. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Bobby Robbins, who's going to be our luncheon speaker today. So if I can have people's attention, please. Yeah, thank you. So Dr. Robbins is the president and the chief executive officer of the Texas Medical Center, which is the largest medical center in the world. Dr. Robbins is an internationally recognized cardiovascular surgeon, and his research includes investigation on stem cells for cardiac regeneration, on bioengineered blood vessels, and automated vascular devices. Prior to coming to the Texas Medical Center, Dr. Robbins was chairman of the Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery at Stanford. And today he's going to talk to us about the challenges and opportunities of complex collaborations. It's really a great joy and a privilege to introduce Dr. Robbins. Please.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the invitation. I'm not worthy to be in this room speaking to you, but at least you've got plastic utensils, so I won't be hearing the ding, 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 ding. So my time's been cut just a little bit, so I'm going to rapidly run through these slides. It'll be sort of an infomercial of the Texas Medical Center for all of our international guests who may not have been here before. But it'll also, I'll try to, in a succinct way, being completely unprepared to speak to an august group like you to impart any wisdom about challenges with collaboration. When I was teaching residents back at Stanford to do heart surgery, I would say, come on, this is not that difficult. For God's sakes, it's not rocket science. And, this is what you guys are all about. So even cardiac surgeons look to you guys as masters of the universe, for sure. So the Texas Medical Center, you can see here in the foreground, it is clearly the largest medical complex in the world. You can see downtown in the background. I don't have time to go through all the facts and figures in the history, but suffice to say, it's made up, if you say the Texas Medical Center, it's a geographic location. It's a campus of almost 2,000 acres. It's made up of 56 different institutions, and then there's a Texas Medical Center Corporation that I work for, which oversees this entire operation. There are basically three missions: to care for patients, deliver care, to do research around the life sciences, and of course to educate the next generation of leaders. Here are some of the institutions that make up the Texas Medical Center. Probably the most internationally famous is MD Anderson, but we have other facilities that are equally as important and large: Baylor College of Medicine, Methodist Hospital, Memorial Hermann System, St. Luke's, and then collaboration with Texas A&M, who has a big life science presence here, and of course the University of Texas and University of Houston. So when I accepted this job 2.5 years ago, these were 56 institutions that were in their own silos. They have their own operating budget. If you look at the consolidated operating budget of the 56 institutions, it's in excess of $20 billion annually. We have more than 50 million square feet of space, and we're adding 5 million incremental square feet of space over the next 3 years. So my challenge was, how do I get all of these institutions to work together? They have their own executive teams, they have their own board of directors, and the the stories of the Texas Medical Center from the outside looking in were that it was a place that had great accomplishment because of the competitive nature and the pioneering entrepreneurial spirit of Texans. And the stories of Dr. Cooley and Dr. DeBakey, two heart surgeons, which were probably the two most famous heart surgeons in the world, working together to do great things in the domain of cardiothoracic surgery, basically had a falling out. Dr. DeBakey took off to Washington to get one of his many awards, and they had been working in the lab discussing the strategies that are very earthly compared to the strategies you're discussing about how to get individuals to Mars. But Dr. Cooley was the young buck who had trained at Hopkins and come back to Texas and thought it was time right now to put the heart into a human being after doing animal research. Dr. DeBakey was the senior statesman and thought it was not time yet. Well, one day when Dr. DeBakey went off to D.C., Dr. Cooley had a patient who was dying, and he went and got the pump and put in, and it's an international story, and he was fired. So he went across the street. He went across the street to St. Luke's and started the Texas Heart Institute, and for 60 years they were the most famous cardiac surgeons in the world, and basically didn't speak to each other, and worked right across the street from each other. So Dr. Alford and Dr. Noon were here during all those times. They can tell these stories much better than me. Then a few years later, there was an unfortunate situation where Baylor and Methodist, who had been partners for probably 40 or 50 years, had a very public, very nasty divorce where they separated their affiliation agreement. So I inherited the job of trying to get a person to Mars, but in a smaller fashion, of how do I get all these institutions to work together. So we of course got a strategic planning process in place. We got everybody from all the institutions, over 250 administrators, scientists, to come together. And I don't have time to go through. I heard a lot of talk about genomics and personalized medicine and things in the panel that I just heard. So all of these things were centered around how could we get the scientists from Rice and Baylor and University of Texas and A&M. I got to meet a very famous, maybe the most famous Texas A&M Aggie, and for all the Aggies in the room, the idea of getting, I usually get a whoop out of that, but you're a more refined crowd, to have Texas A&M and University of Texas work together. How could that ever be possible? Well, I'm telling you that we got them all to work together. There are 5 areas that we focused on for future collaboration and coming together. So what are the challenges? The challenges are, these are very proud, just like the United States and Russia and China and Japan. These are very proud nations. And sometimes you have to check your ego at the door. It's unusual for all of you. Usually when you're in a room away from each other, you're the smartest person in the room. To have everybody who's used to being the smartest person in the room come together and try to check their egos is very difficult. And obviously heart surgeons and neurosurgeons aren't quite rocket scientists, but we think we're close. And so to get people like that to come together with all this history of fighting and not working together, it's a big challenge. So obviously, you figured out how to do that. There are long-standing personal relationships that have been developed in this room and across your agencies. But I would even suggest to you, it might be possible, just like in the University of Texas or in Rice University or in Baylor College of Medicine, just like in NASA or the equivalents in the other countries, there may be even a little bit of problem inside the agencies. And it usually has to do with the culture and the egos of people involved. So you have to have good leaders. You have to have leaders that have vision and have the political skills and the respect of the people that are following the leaders to be able to get things accomplished. I'm very lucky that I inherited a set of leaders from Rice University here with David Lebron, who came from New York, Columbia University, Paul Klopman at Baylor College of Medicine, who was the chair of medicine at Mount Sinai before he came here, Ron DePinto, who was at Harvard and was at Dana-Farber. They understand the incredible power of collaboration. So, just to get to the chase here, we're creating what we think will be a transformative translational research campus that will bring together Baylor College of Medicine, University of Texas, A&M, and UT system. It'll be located about a mile from here. In the blue on the slide is where the big hospitals are. We've got 7,000 hospital beds, 7 million annual patient visits a year. There's nothing like it in one single campus anywhere in the world. And then in the pink area is more of a research zone. So this sort of double helix 30-acre campus it's a surface parking lot now. And in order to have a real translational research campus where these institutions can come together, not only multi-institutional, but obviously multidisciplinary research efforts to translate the fundamental discovery into commercializable products that will, in a trite way, improve the health of humanity, make the world a better place. So these are some of the key ingredients in a mixed-use facility that facilitates the research that goes on. A lot of it has to do with amenities, has to do with conference space, has to do with cafes and shops and bars and restaurants and having living space where people work. So we'll incorporate all of those things into what this campus looks like in probably the next 3 to 5 years. We will have this campus completed. It'll have the large institutions with their anchor buildings that are like ships docking into this double helix structure that has green space on top. It's 5 stories. All the 5 multi-institutional institutes will be in the middle. The researchers will have their own homes and they'll come to the middle to collaborate. There'll be shared facilities like imaging, bioinformatics, biorepositories, vivarium. And we think that this will be an area that will transform the Texas Medical Center and the whole region, because it will then be not competition across the street, but it'll be competition with Boston and San Francisco and Shanghai and London. So that's some of the pictures of things and retail on the bottom space. Just want to give you a snapshot about what we're doing around innovation, because there's another challenge of how do you build an ecosystem to really commercialize all the fundamental discovery that goes on. Well, it takes facilities, it takes a vision, and it also takes outside entities coming here like pharmaceutical companies, venture capital firms, and talent to run these companies. This is an old cookie factory that I inherited. It's got 640,000 square feet of space, built in the 1940s. We took 120,000 square feet to build the largest life science incubator accelerator in the United States, to bring together startup companies, give them an environment, a curriculum that teaches them how to protect their intellectual property, how to incorporate their companies, how to write a business plan, how to get through the regulatory hurdles of the FDA, and then finally, of course, how to raise money and become a prosperous company that we hope will stay here in Houston and will start to be anchor tenants around the whole area. This just shows you some pictures. It's a very cool space that we now have 22 startup companies that are from around the world. We have an Israeli company, a couple of German companies from California and New York, but primarily half of them are from Texas. There are 22 out of 300 applications we got, and we hope that several of these companies will be successful, will get Series A funding, eventually go on to be IPO'd and stay in Houston. We also have the Rice AlsPark program and the University of Houston Red Labs program, which are student-run companies, and we have about 40 of them that are now spending the whole summer in this space, and we have a 6-month curriculum for the 22 startup companies. So it's an incredibly energized space, and they're learning from each other, and we hope that several of these companies will be successful and stay here. This is other space for companies that are beyond the incubator or the accelerator phase and just need space together. And then we have a strategic partnership of 30,000 square feet that we invested about $20 million in for an incubator that we're partnering with J&J. They'll come in and run this facility. It will have Class A wet lab space for biotech companies and medical device companies and pharmaceutical companies, startup companies that need that kind of space. We have ongoing partnerships now primarily around big data and the intersection of the genomic data that I heard talked about in the panel with the phenotypic data. But the most important thing, we can sequence now. We know how to do that. It took 10 years and $4 or $5 billion to get the first human genome. Now it can be done for about $1,000 in 48 hours. It'll be a $50 test. It'll be done in a matter of hours, and we'll decide what drugs to give and all those kind of things. But those are just data. It's like printing a phone book with not being able to read the phone book. We've got to be able to focus in on analysis of the big data to make meaningful use out of it. So we have partnerships now with all these companies and talking to several others like Google and GSK, Medtronic, and Pfizer. So that's a very quick run through. I don't want to stand in your way from talking to space. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. Obviously, there are challenges with collaboration, but at the end of the day, there's got to be a value proposition that's worth it for each of the parties that participate. As in Texas, I've learned the saying that the squeeze has to be worth the juice that you get out of the collaboration. So thank you, wonderful event, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you for a few minutes.
Well, Dr. Robbins is going to be available if you have questions. He's going to be right here, so we'd like to entertain questions, but since we have the connection coming up very shortly, and you see the module already up on the screen. So we'll be starting here very shortly, so if General Stafford and Charlie Bolden would come on up, we'll get you all wired up.
I think they're getting wired. There he is. Where's Lexi?
Lexi, I'm afraid, isn't here, so. Scott Kelly will be appearing here shortly. Scott was launched on March 28th from Baikonur. He'll be up for a one-year mission along with his Russian colleague. They're ready for the microphones.
They both mic'd. They have the mics.
Okay. Scott will be going through what they've been doing on orbit and probably take us on a tour. And we'll have Administrator Bolden and General Stafford talking to Scott. But probably if we have time, we'll probably see if we could entertain some questions from the audience.
They're waiting for the satellite to look.
Yep.
So as soon as it does, it'll.
You're ready. 105, unless he starts early. He might start early since we told him we were ready.
All right, fantastic. Let's go. Okay.
I think the satellite's up now.
Get it? Okay, let's go.
You got a picture in front of you, right?
Didn't know they had turned me on.
Trying to get
Probably
me
trying to get
out
Misha to come out.
out.
Yeah, all right.
That's Scott's other colleague who was up there for a year, Mikhail Koryenko.
Hey, Houston, can you hear us?
Hello, Mr. Can you hear us? Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear, and welcome aboard the International Space Station. How do you hear us?
Scott, we got you and Misha loud and clear, and I'm joined with General Tom Stafford here and several hundred of your nearest and dearest friends who are very interested to hear from you and Misha. So welcome to the Baker Institute and Rice University.
Well, General Bolden, it's great for us to be here and be able to talk to you guys. It's interesting that this week we've actually been doing a lot of space medicine type research on board the International Space Station, basically associated with Misha and my stay here for a year on board. actually the first time we've done a bunch of scans with ultrasound and other diagnostic instruments in the Russian segment while using the lower body negative pressure device, which is really a first for the space station and a first for U.S. astronauts to do that on board. And hopefully we'll find out a lot of interesting data on how our bodies react to this microgravity environment, and hopefully understand some of the problems astronauts and cosmonauts have been experiencing up here with regards to their issues and other things that'll help take us further from Earth, hopefully one day in the not too distant future.
Hey, Misha and Scott, I've got General Tom is here with me, and he's celebrating his 40th anniversary. Now, I know you probably didn't know that, but this is the 40th anniversary of Apollo-Soyuz with General Stafford and General Leonov as the commanders of the respective crews. I think it's quite appropriate that we have him here, and I know he's got a few words for you, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you, Johnny. Scott, Misha, Dobry den, and it looks like you're in great shape there, and we're very happy to see the effort we started 40 years ago with Apollo-Soyuz or Soyuz-Apollo, whichever way you approach it, has led to this, and I'm very honored to be the chairman of the advisory committee on it, and we've pushed for a long time to have a long duration mission, and it's really wonderful to see you two up there, and you're looking in great shape, and I'm sure that year is going to go good, and you're doing great work for us. We're really proud of you.
Well, General, thank you, General Stafford, and all the other guests there. It's really a privilege to be part of this experiment for us on board the space station. I'm going to turn down the volume here a little bit because I'm getting a little feedback.
Glasses always help, Scott. I found that out. There you go.
Okay, let's try that. That might work better, but like I said, it's a real privilege for Misha and I to be a part of this mission. The other thing that's great about this, and one of the things that we all appreciate, is the international component, and that's something that you guys started on Apollo-Soyuz, and it's we're now living your legacy of this partnership, and the International Space Station is an ideal place for countries and different countries and different cultures to work together on something that's important for all of us. And that's one of the things I like, one of the things I relish actually about this International Space Station is that international component to it.
Hey, Misha, you're having I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you're having an opportunity to do something that not very many cosmonauts have done before, which is participation in a joint medical collaborative. You want to say don't do this again, or you got a comment?
Actually, I feel good. I'm very like experiments of our partnership because it's very technological, and I'm proud to take part in these experiments. It's very important for me, and I think for all of us. Thank you.
Who's behind the camera, Scott? Or is it just you and Misha in the module there?
Well, it's just me and Misha right now. I'd mentioned to Gennady that we were doing this event, and he might come down and say hello. I think he was busy doing some other scheduled activities. Today's work day for us. Yeah, but we're just in the Japanese pressurized module. And the reason we do that, a lot of the PAO events in here, I think people wonder why a lot of the events are done from this module. And that is it's because it's out of the way. And there's a lot of activities that go on the space station. And because this is on the end, around a corner, we don't have a lot of people floating in and out of the camera view or us disrupting, all the other important work that goes on here.
Well, Scott, Misha, I was asked by a correspondent yesterday when we did the Apollo-Soyuz did we ever think it would lead to something as big as the International Space Station. I always knew that it would lead to more cooperation and probably include more countries, but I never thought we'd see something that weighed 1 million pounds and include 15 countries. So I think it's wonderful, and that's one of the great things about it, is that it can bring people cooperating together. I wish things could go as good on the ground as what you're doing up in space.
You know, I often try to describe what this space station is like and the, you know, the engineering miracle that it is. You know, I think it's one of the most complicated thing that we as humans have ever built. Like you said, it's 1 million pounds, over the size of a football field, with, you know, many different modules that were built in different countries. Some of these modules were never even connected to each other before until they were in space. You know, done while flying around the Earth, as you know, at 17,500 miles an hour in a vacuum, in extremes of temperature, in a you know, somewhat extreme radiation environment. So all the hardware has to be hardened against that. You know, put together by astronauts and cosmonauts in, you know, in these spacesuits, working in this very, very tough working condition. And then it works. It's been operating for, you know, with people on board for 15 years now. The life support system is really incredible. How we, you know, turn urine into water, the water into oxygen. It's almost like a closed loop system we have. We use the carbon dioxide to also produce water in a device we call a Sabatier reactor. So it's a lot of the technology that we need to go to Mars or elsewhere someday. We're learning right here close to Earth, where we have a very close resupply capability. We can return home in an emergency. We have great diagnostic equipment up here. It's really incredible the type of research we're doing on ourselves. You know, just this week, you know, I woke up one morning, like, I think it was yesterday. 5 minutes after I woke up, I was drawing Samantha's blood. And then within a couple of hours, Misha was in the lower body negative pressure device. And we're doing this OCT eye scan on him and some other scans, you know, related to pressure within his head, measured through his ears. The previous day, I was in the device. We had ultrasound this week in the negative pressure device. Like I said before, this weekend we're actually doing some work with the rodents. So we're doing rodent dissection for, you know, medical research that isn't, you know, how to help astronauts in space. It's how to help people on Earth. And we actually have an X-ray bone densitometer that we put the mice in before we dissect them. And, you know, it's just really, this space station has really morphed into a state-of-the-art facility that, you know, will have benefits for years to come. And like I said before, started with, you know, your collaboration on Apollo-Soyuz 40 years ago.
Hey, Misha and Scott, you know, we're going to book you guys already for next year's summit. You'll be back, I think. And so you'll be a headliner here, the two of you. We've got lots of your principal investigators here, people who built your hardware. And I've been trying to coax them into raising their hand to see if anybody's got a question. But so far, they're being mum. So I'm going to give them one. I do have Dr. Joe Kerwin's got a question that he wants to ask. So.
Is this on?
That's on.
Yeah. You know, 40 years ago when we finished Skylab, I never thought anyone would experience lower body negative pressure in space again. It was kind of unpleasant sometimes. I want to thank both of you for the wonderful work and important work that you're doing, but I want to ask you, how did you make out with the LBNP?
You know, I had done some baseline data collection on the ground, and I didn't really notice much about it, other than I was doing it in a heads down position, was where I started, to kind of simulate the fluid shift you have in microgravity. So I would say it was somewhat of an uncomfortable experience, not too bad doing it on the ground. The first day I did it, which was Tuesday of this week up here, it was I was in it for much longer than I was the second day, because it was the first day we were doing ultrasounds and things took longer, and just the data collection we were doing was a longer protocol. So I was in it for probably, I think, twice as long as I was the next day. And when I was in it for a long period, and we're doing it at what's the pressure we're using, Misha? It's about a 100 millimeter less than ambient here vacuum. So, and it's at a level that's half of what the cosmonauts do in their protocol to get ready to return to Earth. So, it's not as much of a negative pressure as they use for some of their other protocols. So it's like I said, half as much. But what I found after being in it for a long time, once I got out, was I actually felt my head felt a little clearer. It actually felt like in some ways a therapeutic thing, which, is data, and perhaps the device has some merits in affecting this fluid shift. If the fluid shift is actually cause for the some of these problems we've experienced, maybe it could be used as a therapeutic advice. And my completely subjective opinion about it was it kind of made me feel good. It made my head a little bit clearer by not having all that fluid in my head.
Hey, Scott, we've got a question from Walt Cunningham out here now.
Hey, Scott, how you doing? It's interesting as I look and I see you look pretty much normal from here. And 46 years ago, in 11 days, I lost 8 pounds. And what's your personal observation on your body mass? You must be measuring from the time you get there and measuring in body mass. Any observations on what's going on? Is it just the exercise?
People have react to it differently. I think the last time I was here, I lost about 10 pounds, which is good because I could use it. This time, I've probably, lost, maybe 3 or 4 pounds. But you're gaining muscle mass. The exercise equipment we have, so you're replacing fat with muscle. So even though you might not be losing as much, you're getting overall more healthy because of our exercise equipment. The exercise equipment we have is absolutely fantastic. The ARED device is really a state-of-the-art. Astronauts and cosmonauts can't say nicer things about that piece of hardware, how good it is, how much it feels like real weight. And, by exercising on it, 6 or 7 days a week, you really, you're increasing your body mass. So, I think in the past we've had issues with that, but here with the exercise equipment, with the Russian exercise equipment they have, the treadmill, the cycle ergometer, our cycle ergometer, our treadmill, we get a lot of exercise. The food is generally, pretty good. It's a good diet. We have plenty of calories. So I think, things that people have experienced in the past are not, we're really not seeing up here. Plus, we're here a lot longer, so you get used to the environment and you get comfortable in it. And if your appetite was down in the beginning, you're up here long enough to have that corrected by time.
Well, Scott, it looks like you're really already starting to bulk up some.
Well, it's day 69, so it's day 69 now. So hopefully, I won't be too much of a beast when I get home in about, close to 300 days.
Do I have it? I got another question over here. So,
this is Graham Scott. We've spoken before about the twin study that you're involved in with you and your brother, and I just wanted to pass on best wishes from all the investigators. We had a meeting with all the investigators a week ago. We've started to look at some of your baseline data. We won't tell you about that yet, obviously. But how is the study going from your perspective in space, the twin study?
So that study and all the other studies are going really, really well. In like public affairs media events, people often ask us about the results. And as you know, I won't even know the results until, well after I get back. So, our perspective is that we're collecting the data. The procedures are working, the hardware is working well. And so far between the twin study, which, as you know, is mostly related to samples, but there are, other scans and things that we do. The fluid shifts experiment, all the other life science experiments, even the stuff not associated with us, the rodent stuff is really going absolutely outstanding. So, no complaints. Appreciate all the hard work you guys do to put into this. And I think this, the space station is really coming into its own now. We have really some fascinated work in all areas with all the partners involved and all the principal investigators, and hopefully we're going to see, and I think we are seeing already, and we'll continue to see great results.
Hey, Scott, for some of us who have not had the privilege of being on station, is the module in which you and Misha are currently operating, is that generally used as your comm center or your PAO center, so you do all of the videos out of there?
Yeah, General. So this is a Japanese pressurized module, which is a science module. It has a bunch of different science racks in all different scientific disciplines. It has a robotics workstation to fly the Japanese arm and the exposed facility, which is on the other side of the bulkhead here. There's an airlock for putting experiments in and out into the vacuum of space. There's actually what's called the JLP, which is up above us, which is a storage facility that's quite large and is very, very important while we're up here. But, like I was mentioning earlier, the reason we do this, these PAO events in here, is because if we did it in the U.S. laboratory module or in the Russian segment, there's, those are kind of thoroughfares when people are moving around the space station. And it wouldn't really interfere, but it would cause people to maybe pause and not kind of go into some rack or some storage, or maybe even talk on the space to ground if they're near the camera. So it gives us a little bit of a private area to do these where it doesn't affect the other people's work. And I might add, I like doing them doing the PAO events in here too, because it isn't a U.S. module, and it shows that this is an international partnership, and we could even do them in Columbus if we wanted to too. But it shows the international aspect of this, which is, I think, one of the highlights of this space station.
If I understand it correctly, the deployment of the CubeSats is done with a Cubesat deployment mechanism on the back of the gym there. Is that? Can you show us anything about it for those few down here who fly CubeSats and haven't had a chance to see this stuff or imagine it? And then you may have to explain what I just said in English.
Well, sir, I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. At first, I thought you were referring to the flags we had on board, but perhaps you're referring to another piece of hardware.
Well, I was talking about when we deploy CubeSats. My understanding was that we do it generally out of Yeah,
I think I missed the CubeSat part, but yeah. So this is an airlock, and it's not for people; it's for hardware. And it's got a slide table, and you can put a satellite on the slide table, and we've been doing that. And you send it outside, and then the Japanese fine arm will pick it up and deploy these satellites into space. This is a great capability. I almost wish we could use it on spacewalks just to prove its ability to put hardware outside, independent of the astronauts, give us some more room in the airlock that the crew is in. So but we haven't done that yet. The other issue is the space station's really big, and this exposed facility is, got a lot of important science going on. You wouldn't want to disturb it, and it's also it's kind of a haul to get from the airlock that the astronauts go out of, or the cosmonauts on the Russian segment, to here. But it still provides us with an interesting capability to maybe, partner up this airlock with the U.S. airlock as kind of a technology demonstrator, so to speak.
Fantastic. Let me see if I got one more question here before they make me hang up.
Say, Scott, I'll say one thing. The TV presentation's coming through loud and clear, high definition. It's just like it's on a Hollywood set.
Hey, Misha, one last question for you, and it's, you've been there, like Scott said, now, 69 days. Pace-wise, have you made any change in your pattern from the way you did before when you knew you were only going to be there 6 months? Do you find yourself consciously changing your pace on board?
Of course, it's a little bit different. It's twice different in compare with 6 months flight. But my opinion, I understand that on Earth I will fly during 12 months. I'll fly 12 months. It depends of mine, and I think it's very important you understand you will fly 12 months. I think Scott thinks the same. And I am sure our mission will success because I have a very professional and very good crew and very good friends on board. Thank you.
Hey, Scott, one of the questions Mr. Abbey just asked was, what's a typical day like for you all? Like you said, you got up the other day and you started with a blood draw from one of your crew members. You jumped into the LBNP. Is that typically what you all are doing, since you've got this incredible biomedical protocol that we haven't had put together by the international teams before?
Well, I think for Misha and I, there are a little bit more data takes than maybe your typical crew member would have. But one of the great things about working up here is the typical days are rare. It's quite often we go from maybe a day like yesterday where we're doing the lower body negative pressure to a day like Terry and Samantha had, where they were fixing the one of the spacesuits. They were doing a procedure that took them all day, that required them to remove a fan pump separator on one of the spacesuits that separates the water and moves the air around inside, and replace it. And this is something that's generally done on the ground. We've done a few of them on board, but it was never intended to be done on board. So that's kind of a typical day, having to, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, Terry and I spent almost a whole week fixing one of the Cedras, the carbon dioxide removal assembly. This is another activity that we weren't really planning to do on orbit, but we did. Some days you're working more science, other days more maintenance. We had SpaceX up here recently, which required, I don't know how many hours of cargo ops. This Sunday we're doing the rodent dissections on 4 of the rodents. So it's there's not the typical day. We generally get up sometime between 6 and 7, have the daily planning conference, around 7:30. So your workday sort of starts when you wake up. You start getting ready and preparing for things. Of scheduled work, and it's somewhat confusing that people will hear, well, we only work 6.5 hours. that's like scheduled work activities. But a lot of times those activities take longer than 6.5 hours. And plus there are all these other things that you have to do up here that are part of just maintaining your daily life that take time. So the workday actually goes from, for me, from the time I wake up until about 8 o'clock at night, 8:30, and then I go to bed about 10:30. So with all the work and the exercise you do every day, it's quite a full day, and there really isn't a typical day.
Scott, one thing you brought up was one thing I experienced in all 4 of my missions. Even though you plan it, everything takes just a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I understand the ground's position about how, they want to get the most out of us, so they generally schedule us for the amount of time they think it's going to take, not the amount of, to give us more time just in case it runs long. So, it's human nature to do that. They want us doing as much stuff as we can, and I understand that. But yeah, you're quite right. It is often that things run long, and we have to just adjust to them.
Hey, Scott, you all have been real gracious with your time, but before we do get out of here, let me give you and Misha an opportunity we've got an incredible team of folk down here from almost every country that participates on station, and some that don't. Any question or questions that you might have of any of them to think about, not to answer, but to think about as we go through the next day and a half of this annual summit that's focused on making life better for you and crews that are going to fly even longer than you one of these days, hopefully on a journey to Mars and farther. See, he's pondering.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is, I don't think NASA and the partnership has done the best job they could in selling the value of the space station, in explaining the type of research we do here, how important it is, and explaining it in terms that, the general public can understand. I sometimes read some of the just the explanations, for lack of a better word, the summaries of the science experiments that try to explain what we're doing and why and what the results are, and I sometimes have a hard time understanding them. So, I would challenge folks, because I know that we got great scientists and they do great things and we're learning great things, but I would challenge people to try to do it, to explain it in a way that the taxpayer and the people that are investing in the facility can really understand and appreciate. And I know it's not easy. But it's I think it's something that's very important, and I think it's something that's definitely doable.
Misha, you got any messages for me that I can take to Igor when I meet with him in Paris? Because we're going to stick our heads together and figure out how to be better partners than we are now, which I think we're pretty good.
I remember our meeting in Paris, you're right, and I just can say hello. I'm glad to hear your voice, and I hope we'll meet again after our flight, after our mission with Scott, and I'm sure our mission, I repeat, will be success.
Hey, well, you guys, you've been great taking your time, and I know you got a lot of work to do. From all of us down here, thanks so very much for being so gracious and letting us come into your home. And you all take care. We're thinking about you all the time.
Good luck.
Yes, sir. And it's thank you, and it's a real pleasure to be able to talk to you guys today. Thank you.
And Houston, this is Rice, and I think we're done.
Well, that concludes our discussion with the space station crew. And we'll be going back into the conference room and hear from Administrator Bolden.
You're up.
I'm up. Fantastic. Good job. What time do we start?
Very good, Charlie. That was well done.
Thank you.
You did a great job as Capcom.
That's what Tom told me. Just be.
You might be able to get your job in the control center.
If I deploy mission control, you'll be able to go last in this.